Hey friends, my name is Randi Brown and I'm a speech-language pathologist and AAC specialist. I love all things speech therapy, so I started a podcast to sit down with different people to talk about it. So whether you're an SLP or someone just interested in the world of speech therapy, come join me today for our episode of Talking with Randi. Welcome back to the third episode of Talking with Randi. I'm your host, Randi Brown, and today we have Courtney Trevino back with us today. We wanted to finish talking about her research studies and then offer some fun and practical therapy tips and tricks and all that good stuff. So, if you didn't listen to the first episode, Courtney is a PhD student at TCU, almost about to graduate. Super exciting. But listen to that first because it's going to help this episode make more sense, I would say.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Definitely.
Okay. So go ahead, recap. So we left off, she had just shared with us about the first big research study you did for your program. So go ahead. They all kind of build off of each other. So give us a little bit of a recap of that first study. And then let's talk about the next two studies that you've done in your program and the clinical implications and all of that good stuff.
Fun. Yeah, so we started talking last session, or sorry, last recording.
It's been a few weeks.
Yeah, let me turn my brain on here. So we started talking last recording about my research studies. And so the first one that we went through like pretty thoroughly, right? Yeah, the first one that we talked about was I wanted to figure out the best way to collect a language sample for children who speak using AAC. Specifically, we're talking about kids that are early language learners. So kids that are really, for the most part, producing 50 or less meaningful words on their AAC devices. That's who I've included in that study and throughout all the rest of my studies as well.
Okay, that's good.
So that's sort of my marker. Now I'm a little flexible on that. Like if somebody's got like 55 or 60, like we'll still include them.
Yeah.
But we're looking at that general population. It's just not a hard line.
Yeah.
So what we found in that study was that the best way to collect a language sample from this population to get a valid language sample, or like to get a language sample that truly represents their independent abilities to communicate, was to do a play-based elicitation. Like you literally just sit and play with the child for 10 minutes. And
No prompting.
Like don't initiate any language. Don't model any language. Just sit and have a couple toys out. Don't use a doll. We talked about that at length last time. Do not use a doll. Use like Mr. Potato Head and a farm set and a car. Those were really successful for me. And just like have natural interactions, respond naturally. If the child says yellow, one of the kids said yellow, I just came back and said, yes, yellow. So I didn't model any language. I just responded naturally to what the kid was saying. If they pointed something, I handed it to them. But I didn't say like, oh, what is this? What's the name of this? Right? I didn't do any of that. I just was saying typical, like what would get a good language sample of their typical expressive language. And that was the answer.
Yeah, it really, I've, tied that into my evaluations since that conversation.
So
and it
fun.
really does work because it's eye-opening to see what they do with full reign of independence in a safe, fun, play-based scenario. But also, it's really cool when you see those skills line up to the skills on the communication matrix and how they go together. So I love how you kind of married those in the study or use those in tandem. So I'm using that clinically.
That's awesome.
And I can attest it's a really helpful way to support how you're describing your early language learner and any types of communication that they use. And then also for me, I was using it for a reevaluation this past week. It was nice because it was kind of telling of some of the skills. Or some of the skills that I thought maybe the student had generalized that he hasn't quite generalized yet. And so that kind of showed me that maybe we need to work on that in a little bit more diverse ways. Or like just for example, like in therapy, he'll ask me for some preferred toys and he'll ask for more on the device. Yeah. But without me doing any initiation, he just took my hand in and put it on. So we need to keep working on that, you know, which great. Now I know that because I thought he was a little more independent with it. And so helpful.
It is it was interesting to see because the study the elicitation strategy that we, for the most part, compared to the play-based, like natural one that I'm talking to you about, the other one very much prompted interaction. And so we got a ton more out of the kids, but it didn't correlate as well with what the information from the communication matrix because it's like we were over-prompting language. And so we were eliciting not their independent skills. We were just eliciting more of like the extent of the skills that they have.
How far can you push them?
Which is also valuable information. So if you need to know that, it's going to take you 3 times as long. But the CSBS is still a great option. Yeah. I will say too, I think one thing that I learned really writing the lit review, the introduction of that research article, was that I think a lot of us, I know I was in practice, was like kind of scared of language samples. Like, oh man, if I do this language sample, then I got to transcribe the whole thing.
It's a commitment sometimes.
It's a commitment. It takes a long time. And what I learned doing this sample is that I don't think it needs to be as big of a commitment as we all make it. Like you really...
I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Yes. Like if you want to look at how many words the child says in a language sample, then do this protocol and record however many words, and video record this and then just go back and count or like mark them down on an Excel document and you can like literally just tally them as you're going and you could collect the sample in 10 minutes. You could probably, if you're just looking at how many different words are said or how many total words were said in general, I mean, that's going to take you one listen through. It might take you 15 minutes total, right?
I agree.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be
I think I
super
overcomplicated it for a long time.
I did too.
And I don't know if this is like the most like kosher thing to say, but also like real life as a speech therapist who's really busy. So with like yesterday when I was putting the results from that play-based elicitation language sample in my report, I just looked at what I wanted to see or what I wanted to measure, and I wanted to see how he was using gestures, how he was using any form of words or communication, and then like how he was interacting with me. And so I just took notes on what happened throughout, and I listened back once to check it, and then I elaborated on those findings. And like, because that supported the other data that I had, if that makes sense. So
and I think I made this point last time, but if you're doing the self, you're in for 2 hours anyways. Yeah. So it's not, I think the whole idea of like, oh, it's going to take me maybe an hour to analyze all of it. Well, like, yeah, but you're not doing the self at that point. So you're saving that hour of sitting in front of the child because elicitation only takes 10 minutes. Yeah. So I think in that sense, like timing works out. A recommendation that I have that I don't think I mentioned last time that I wanted to make sure that I said today is go pull that article. Because in that article, it's in AJSLP, or American Journal of Speech Language Pathology. It's one of the ASHA journals. And so if you're an ASHA member, you can get it for free. And so it's the title, I can say the title on here in case anybody is like actually
I think that's a great idea.
Trying to pull the article.
I referenced it in a training that I did a couple of weeks ago, and people were like, oh, send that to me. And so I think people are interested in reading it for sure.
So the title is Determining an Effective Language Sample Elicitation Strategy for Early Language Learners Who Speak Using Augmentative and Alternative Communication. So we picked a really lengthy title.
It was good. You know what it reminds me of? Have you watched Parks and Rec?
Like pieces of it.
Oh, okay. There's an episode where Leslie Knope, the main character, is like offering to help the newspaper people like write a title, and she's like definitely like, she's the Parks and Rec director, and she's like giving them all these suggestions, and they're like super long. I feel like we do that with research articles all the time.
We do.
Where it's
100%.
like teaching kids to talk using AAC, consider the following language,
with like 10 more words. Yeah. No, absolutely. So authors are Trevino and Lund, and it's 2024. So with all of that information, you should be able to pull this up real quick. But the reason that I recommend going to pull this is because we put in this sample, we put in this article, every category that we coded for.
Oh, okay.
And then And so by category, I mean like we coded for body movements, we coded for types of gestures, we coded for function of communication, we coded for, I called it sophistication of communication. I kind of struggled to come up with a word for it. Maybe level of communication is what I called it.
You're talking about pre-symbolic, symbolic, concrete, abstract?
Yeah, yes. So I use the communication matrix to do it, if you're familiar with that. If you're not familiar with it, it was like, was this communication attempt, was it a body movement? Was it a gesture? Was it a babble? Like we added that in? Was it a meaningful one-word production? Was it a multi-word meaningful production? But like I have all of these coding categories in there, and then I have all of these, the actual codes that we used in there. And so the way that that's useful for you is if you have a child who is in the early learning or early stages of learning how to produce single meaningful words, you can come on this article and see like what we felt was important to track for this population.
Very
and
helpful.
that can give you, it can give you just ideas of what it is that you should be tracking. You can see the different ways that we looked at gestures and the different ways that we looked at like whether something was communicative versus not communicative. And we define those things really clearly in here.
Okay, so definitely take some time to pull the article. That's great. Okay.
Yeah, it's
very
somewhere
helpful
in the methods. I just think, like, I think if anybody is listening to this that's just kind of sitting out there like, man, how am I going to eval this child?
Yeah.
Like, come pull this, spend 5 or 10 minutes in the method section, and I think it can give you some good ideas. And then, like I said, like, you don't have to sit and elicit and then transcribe and then code everything and then run it through Salt. Man, if you have the time for that, that is amazing.
I
and like
don't.
you should. Yeah, but I don't. So like what you really can do is like, this is going to help you figure out what it is that you need to track. And then you can go through and track it in different ways.
I feel like that's like growing in your savviness as an SLP is making language samples work for what you need them to, because I used to do the whole meal deal. And now I do that. I make language samples work for what I want out of them.
And then that's it.
And then that's it, because I only have so much time. And so, I love that. And I think it's a good encouragement to other SLPs like y'all who are, you know, maybe wanting to learn more about how to do evaluations for kids who either need AAC or already have AAC. And it's just less daunting. Would you agree? It's like less daunting than you think it is.
Yeah, I agree. If you go into it with the mindset of like, I'm going to figure out the information that I need to figure out instead of I'm going to do a language sample, I think it's a completely different mindset.
Completely different.
Yeah, I will say that's a future direction of mine, is that I actually want to look at like, can we get valid data, which my hypothesis is yes, that we can.
Yeah.
But can we get valid data from recording like a 10-minute language sample, and then can I just come back and like count the couple things that I actually want to count? And is that going to be just as accurate as if I transcribed the whole thing and coded the whole thing?
100%.
Because if they are, then like I understand learning the whole transcription and all that kind of stuff, but like
we could free up some time.
Yeah, we could help some SLPs out.
Yeah, so. Which I think everyone thanks you for attempting that. For sure. Tell me a little bit. So you concluded that study. So tell me the next study that you did, and just share with us about it, what you were looking for, what you wanted to measure, important clinical implications, things like that.
Yeah, so this is my favorite study. I had so much fun doing this.
My favorite study. I love this one.
This was so much fun. So we really wanted to look at the best way to teach vocabulary words to children who speak using AAC. And we all know modeling, right? I mean, how many times have we all heard that? So
and it's well documented in the literature.
Totally.
Yeah.
So if you model words on an AAC device, the literature suggests there are 4 main studies that really look at that specifically. But the literature suggests that if you model language on an AAC device, that children are going to start to learn those words. What I will say, which is interesting about those 4 studies, they're great studies, but they actually didn't use like high-tech devices like what we have.
I did not know that, because I've looked at like abstracts and stuff, but
So they didn't use like high-tech systems like LAMP Words for Life or Proloquo to Go. They were using like other small, lower-tech systems, just I'm sure out of feasibility. Or like a lot of these studies were done like up to 20. I think one of them is a 2004 citation. So they were done a long time ago. Different things were done back then. Yeah. So we really wanted to make sure that we were looking at how to best teach words to children using like high-tech AAC because a lot of kids are using these systems. So we wanted to compare sort of two different schools of thought. There are two different strategies, I guess, or approaches to teaching vocabulary to verbal children. There is a structured approach, which can sometimes be called direct teach or explicit instruction is what we call it in the article. And then there is a more naturalistic intervention, which I think is what most people would be a lot more familiar with in speech pathology.
I remember in graduate school, we talked a lot about the continuum between the two and finding yourself on like
where you should find
yourself on the continuum and how it kind of can change from client to client, things like that.
Yeah.
Like speaking about like supporting verbal language development.
Right. And so, and the naturalistic side can sometimes be called like follow and labeling or incidental teaching if anybody's familiar with those terms. But the literature suggests that for children who are at risk for vocabulary deficits, verbal children at risk for vocabulary deficits, they actually learn words better in a structured intervention. Okay. So then my mentor, Dr. Emily Lund, she actually she does research with children who have hearing loss, children who are deaf or hard of hearing. She investigated those two different approaches with that population as well, children who are deaf or hard of hearing who did have vocabulary deficits, and they also learned more words. They showed better vocabulary outcomes in the structured intervention, which sort of goes against like what I feel like I learned a lot of. Like I learned a lot of like be natural, make it natural, model during play, all of that kind of stuff. But our thought was, okay, well, for children, if children who are having vocabulary deficits are learning better with structured intervention for a couple populations, then we're definitely working with a population who has deficits in vocabulary when we're working with children who speak using AAC. Yeah. First of all. And then second of all, they just sort of have more to do when they learn words. Yeah. Yes. It's not just I'm listening and I'm looking at what you're saying and I'm going to try and say it later. They have to listen and then know how to find that word literally on their system. Like it's not just finding the word in their brain. It's like not just storing and finding it in their brain. It's like storing in their brain also where it's located on their system. They have to know that if I want to say dog on Lamport's for Life, that I'm going to touch the picture of the dog, which is maybe intuitive, so we'll go a different route. They will have to know if they want to say monkey. Yeah. They have to touch the picture of the dog, they have to touch the zoo, and then they will find the monkey. Yeah. And they have to not only understand that this thing that says ooh, ah, ah, and is brown and scratches its head is a monkey, but these are the steps that I'm going to take to find that word. It's like an additional skill.
And I know sometimes, like when working with early language learners who, learning single words is a newer skill for them, sometimes keeping their attention for that pathway, it's just, there's, like you said, there's just extra involved. Like, I think that we can, show them and teach them, but you're right, it is extra. They have to learn these motor plan pathways and they have to figure out where it's at in each folder. And to go back to what you said is play or fill in modeling, be really naturalistic and play based. I think that there's definitely a place for that in the structure, but I do think sometimes it can be, if we are so on the continuum, if we're so naturalistic and we're not providing direct teach opportunities, sometimes our kids who have deficits with vocab and language and communication, they're with us because they need some direct instruction. And so I love how, you're going to highlight the importance of that, I guess. So,
yeah. Well, and so that's what we tested. That's what we wanted to figure out. Is it better for kids to just be playing and pick up on words while they're playing? And can they do that on an AAC device? Or are they going to learn words faster in a more structured environment. And so we did a single subject design. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that type of research, but you have like a smaller number of children in the study. So we had 3 kids in the study. All of them spoke using lamp words for life.
Yeah.
So we need to repeat this obviously with children on other systems, but in order to sort of standardize the process and make sure that we were really looking at, like really comparing apples to apples, like we chose lamp words for life. Yeah. And then we did not include children who have autism.
Right.
Because that population may process language differently. And so we would, again, like to repeat the study with that population.
Agreed. I think that'd be great.
Yeah. To see if the results are same for that population. Yeah. So all that to say, you know, we're for the most part looking at children who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. I'll say one participant had an IQ above 70 and 2 had an IQ below 70. So the range, I think, was like 61 to 75, I think. Okay. So, we're not just talking about only you know, kids who have an IQ above 70. We're talking about the whole spectrum here.
Yeah.
And every child learn words more efficiently in the structured intervention.
And it's like, it was pretty mind-blowing because they all had pretty good, so what am I trying to say? If I'm remembering correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, they all had good continuity of keeping the words you worked on, right? Like they were able to, you know.
They were learning and retaining them, is that what you're saying?
Yes, learning and retaining them. Because I know, like, you know, when we teach kids new skills or when we learn new skills, we all have regressions, and then, you know, some of us can pick those back up quicker than others. But I think it's really impressive that in this more structured environment, because of, you know, I don't know, would you say the repetition and the structure, I guess, is what helped their little brains hold on to it better? Like, I think sometimes, because watching you do work with these kids in this study, and then also sometimes whenever I have been modeling words on the fly that occur in play, sometimes I feel like there's not always continuity of holding on to those words by the next session because it was just a quick model. Like, I mean, I'll have them do it with me and I'll do the, you know, describe the pathway, but I don't know. Like, I think sometimes I don't always get the continuity of the words. And so, I don't know. I know that your study involved a lot of repetition with the vocabulary as well. Maybe I'm jumping across.
No, you're not. I think, so a lot of what you're saying with kids losing the continuity, I think we saw that a lot with the naturalistic intervention.
Interesting.
It was like they learned some words, but then when it came time to come back and test the next week to see if we could move on to a new word list, they had lost a lot of the words that they had learned the previous week. And so we had to come back and like reteach those words, which then slowed down the word learning process. Whereas with the direct teach intervention, they learned words and then they kept them faster. Or they learned words and they kept them.
Yeah.
I think, so in both interventions, I modeled the word 4 times.
Okay.
And I prompted the child to imitate 4 times.
Okay.
So I would say if you're looking for a number of times that you need to be saying words in sessions, like I would say at least 4 was good for the children that we had. Some kids are going to need more. Some kids are going to need less.
Yes.
But I would say like kind of start around 4 and then sort of
I feel like
mess with that a little bit.
Yeah. And I think for each kid that you work with, you can kind of find the sweet spot. And like sometimes too, words that are a little more motivating, I feel like, you know, they may catch on to quicker. Yes. And that's just life of being a language learner. Yeah. Like we like words that are most meaningful to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the other piece that I think made a huge difference in the structured intervention working better, I guess, for lack of better words, than the naturalistic intervention was that we explicitly taught the children the navigational pathway to find the words. So
this is so powerful, I feel. It works.
I really think that a lot of it lies in this. And so, and like, it makes sense when you like flesh it out too.
It feels duh when you think about it. Yeah. And I also think, I know you're going to describe it more in depth, I feel like it boosts receptive language skills overall because they're learning a name for something that may not be the actual item that they're working towards. And I would assume they're learning how that those are related words too. But
you're sort of helping like development of categories.
Yeah.
Which leads into my next
Oh my gosh, it's also fun.
Love it. Okay. So when we keep going with the monkey, so I'm gonna stay there. But so if we were working on the word monkey, the therapist in the intervention would say, okay, this is a monkey, show the picture of the monkey, whatever. Play with the toy monkey. And then she would say, first you're going to touch the dog, then you touch the picture of the zoo, then you touch the monkey. And then she'd say, okay, now it's your turn. First touch the dog, and the child would touch the dog. And then, okay, now touch the zoo. And if the child would maybe touch, I don't know, what's one of the other ones? Dinosaurs is up there. If the child almost touched dinosaurs, she'd be like, oh, no, look at this one over here. This is zoo. See, there's an elephant and a giraffe. This one is zoo. Then touch the zoo, and she'd, help the child touch the zoo. And then now find the monkey. There's the monkey. Good job.
Yeah.
And she would do that for every model and every imitation. So once, if she's modeling 4 times and the child is imitating 4 times, by the time the child leaves the session, the child has explicitly heard and watched somebody explain the pathway to get to the word that they want to say. And I think that is what stuck. When we would do the the structured intervention, when we would show them like that card, like, hey, we're going to work on this word now, a lot of the kids would get there before she could even model.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And because the modeling and the imitation was almost this interaction between them, because she was telling the child how to get there. Yeah. It almost brought the child's attention in more. I didn't measure this. Yeah. So this is total, like this is anecdotal. Yeah. Yeah. This is not, I don't have, but I'm like, maybe I should go back and measure this.
Oh, yeah, it's good to talk about these things.
This would be interesting. But it almost brought the child in. And so the SLP would model, but the child would say the word on their device at the same time that the SLP modeled it. And so the kid was almost getting 8 productions, and the SLP was getting 4 models. There was more focus on the device. There was more focus on the language itself. It seemed that when you lost that component and it was much more naturalistic, the naturalistic intervention just the child chose which word they wanted to talk about, and then the SLP modeled 4 times, and the child was prompted to imitate 4 times, but there was no structure. It just was like, we're playing with this toy. It's really fun. I'm going to model the word. But like the SLP would model the word, and if the child just happened to not be looking at the device at that moment, they're still learning the word, but they can't find it.
Yes.
Like they have to be able to find the word on their system.
It makes me think of, it kind of breaks my heart sometimes. So I have a kiddo that I'm working with right now who has a LAMP device. And when I introduce a new vocabulary word related to, whatever we have out that day, I'll model, I'll do my first modeling. Like I'm trying to think of an example. I have these peekaboo barns that we've been doing farm animals with. And so, which she's got now. But for example, I would do, okay, we're going to touch the dog, and then we're going to touch the birds because there's the duck. And she would want to find duck after it snapped back to the homepage, but she would look like almost like, oh no, where'd it go? But then after I showed her again a few more times, highlighting the pathway, she's been able to really grow her language skills. But it makes me so sad when you see that they're looking for a word, but they don't know where it's at, but they know it's on there. And so I think this kind of really shifts that to where you're giving such explicit attention to the pathway to help them find it. But also this, it makes sense. Like if you think about, obviously this is not an articulation situation, but kids who have SSDs and you are rebuilding a motor plan, it takes elicitation after elicitation after elicitation. And that's what we're doing. We're building motor plans for language. And so it just makes sense that it's going to take elicitation, and that's going to be a faster process when we give it, explicit teach versus incidental occurrence. And I think there's would you agree that there's a time and a place for modeling incidentally? Totally. When you're not doing your structured work, I think there's a time and place for that. But I think this is just really powerful information because this is something that we can apply if you are a parent of an AAC user, a teacher of an AAC user, an SLP of kids who use AAC. Like, this is just a good strategy to use to amp up word learning, and they're going to learn faster, is what it sounds like your findings were.
They did learn faster. All children learned words faster in the in the structured intervention. So the first child learned, I think, 14 words in the structured. I'm not going to give numbers because I don't remember. The first child and the second child learned more words in the structured than in the naturalistic. The third child learned the same amount of words in both, but he received 2 less intervention sessions in the structured intervention and still learned as many words as he did in the naturalistic.
Okay.
Yeah, because he just, there were multiple absences or school was out. There was something, I don't remember what it was, but regardless, and that's actually true for all kids. All of them, the child 1 and child 2 had 1 less intervention session in direct teach or in the structured intervention than they did in the naturalistic, and they still learned more words.
Wow.
And then the third child learned the same number of words and had 2 less sessions. And so again, we're just seeing more efficiency with word learning, which is what they need, because these kids need to learn words fast. They're behind.
Yes.
Right? That's the end goal.
Yes.
Like, I need to get you to 50 words, because if I can get you to 50 words, you still need to continue to grow your vocabulary, but now I can help you to start pairing these words together.
Yes.
And so I think this is a really viable way to quickly get children to 50 words.
Yeah.
And we did this intervention in a school setting. Like, we drove to the school and did it in the school. The intervention took 30 minutes long.
Yeah.
Like, we tried to make it so realistic for everybody to just pick up this intervention and run with it.
Yeah.
The papers, we're going to submit it to an article like this week. So it'll be in review for a while. But when it comes out, it is, I mean, there's literally step for step on like how we did this intervention. You should be able to pick it up.
I'll share it
and run with it. Yeah.
Whenever it comes out.
You should be able to pick it up.
Okay, I'll put it on my social media for those of you that follow. So that way we can all read it. I think something that's really important to highlight too is all of the kids who participated in this study were having a great time when they were doing this. I think we should talk about that, because child-led therapy and play is super important, and I think that that's, something that we talk about a lot. But I do think we would be amiss to feel or what am I trying to say? There is an importance for direct teach and structured teaching for kids who have language deficits to help continuity of learning and for them to catch up at a quicker pace. And so, I think that it's important to remind ourselves that we can do this in a way that is structured. It's teaching kids the words they need, but they're still having a great time.
Yes.
Because I don't want anyone to misinterpret that you were sitting there being like, say the word.
Yeah,
say
thank
the
you
word.
for that.
And also no hand over hand either.
None of that.
None of that.
We didn't do any of that.
And so, and I observed several of these sessions because I was at this study you ran at my previous school district.
Yeah.
And everyone was having fun. And you had toys that related to each of the target vocabulary words that they were able to interact with to get exposure to what this looks like in real life and how I play with it. I mean, they were all really kid-friendly words and things like that. Yeah, share about that.
We pulled the words from the Stanford Word Bank, which if you're looking, it's a free word bank online that's research-based, and it's just a huge list of early developing words, and it can tell you when in the developmental process they are developed. So if you're looking for a list of appropriate words to be teaching children, that it would be my first place to send any therapist. If you're looking for words, go there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did have a lot of fun. I'm so glad that you said that, because it was sort of in the back of my...
Everyone had a great time.
We did have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way that the structured intervention worked was I came in and I modeled, we worked on 10 words per session. So I modeled all of them once and prompted the child to imitate them. So I would model and I would say, first dog, then touch the zoo, then the monkey, and then the child would imitate, and I would do the navigational description again. And we did that with all 10 words. I mean, it took 3 minutes. It was a real quick run through.
Yeah.
And then I laid all of the pictures out, and I wanted to make sure that the child knew what the picture represented.
Yeah.
Because if they didn't know what the picture represented, then I understood, okay, I need to teach you that this is a monkey.
Yeah.
If you know that this is a monkey, now I just have to teach you how to find it on your system. So those are two very different things. And so I laid out all the pictures and I was like, okay, touch monkey, touch elephant, touch pencil, whatever. And the child touched all of them. Once the child touched all of them accurately, again, that took 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes, 2 minutes. Then I collected up all of the cards, and then it was fun time. So I brought out a toy, and then I would pull one of the cards, and I would model the word 3 times and describe the navigation, and I would prompt the child to imitate 3 times and describe the navigation. It was pretty, like, it wasn't like, oh, I have to model, and then you have to imitate, and then I have to model. It was not structured in that sense.
Yeah.
But then, we'd get out the toy and play with the toy a little bit, and the monkey would sit on her head, and then the monkey would sit on the kid's head, and then I'd be like, what is that thing right there? And the kid, so structured in the sense of, like, we were directly teaching the words, and it was a very fast-paced moving
which I find
intervention.
Kids often do best with faster pace.
Yeah, there was no time to
there was no time to
run around,
decide that you needed to run away.
And then we did that for every word. So I will say, like, if I were to run this in real life speech therapy, which is different than it just naturally is different than an intervention study. If I were to run this in real life speech therapy, I think what I would do, we taught 10 words a session. I think I would teach maybe 8 words a session.
Okay.
And
for me, it depends on each kid because I have different,
for sure.
I have kids with different levels of stamina.
Yeah.
Of direct versus indirect. And so that's kind of how it works for me. But I feel like I can get 5 to 8.
Yeah. And I will say, like, shoot for the stars on that too.
Yeah.
Because we had 3 very different children.
Yeah.
And all of them made progress. And some of them made more progress than others, but all of them made progress. And so don't underestimate and say, like, oh, like, let's start with 2 words here. Like, start with at least 5. Like, 5 words in a session.
I think give kids the benefit of a doubt on the word learning because I think they're so ready a lot of the time. They're so ready. I wanted to bring up something else about the word learning. Did anyone have any modified vocabulary sets or anything like that?
No, sure didn't.
They were all on full.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
That is something that I also really wanted to mention. Like, we did not hide any words on the LAMP devices. Okay. We didn't go into vocab builder, there was no, like, limited vocabulary on the systems. It was literally the system as it comes. And then we did not create any additional pages where it's like, oh, all the words that we're targeting is on this page, and so we're just going to come into this page.
It all followed the LAMP language representation system. Okay.
All of it was just literally the device as if you just purchased the app and opened it up.
Which is great. I think sometimes
we didn't mess
people
with any of
are
it.
so concerned that they need to hide words because it looks overwhelming. And I always tell adults who are like, this feels like a lot. I had an occupational therapist ask me just a couple weeks ago. She was like, that looks like too much. And I said, it looks like a lot, but I promise you they rock it and they can handle it. And it's good for them to have access. Okay, I wanted to make sure that there wasn't any modified page sets or anything. No, okay.
No modified page sets. Yeah,
that's awesome.
We did LAMP as it comes.
What an encouragement that all of those kids made so much progress without having to hide anything at all.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I also will say, I think the world of AAC sort of shifts back and forth, and I don't, maybe you'll have me on again in like 5 years and I'll have this research study done.
Probably sooner than that.
But I will say, like, nouns are not the enemy. I feel like
Amen.
At some point it was like, all we care about is nouns. And then it was like, nouns are the worst. Let's teach want, go, play. And those words are important too, but like, nouns are really important. 1, 2, kids just learn nouns faster because the picture looks like what it is that you're talking about.
It is concrete, and we know when we look at language development, concrete understanding of language comes before abstract learning of language, right? That's correct? Okay.
Yes. No, it is. And so learning nouns is easier because it's concrete, because it's very clear. Like, this thing of Play-Doh looks like that picture of Play-Doh that's on your device itself right now. And so...
And what a way for them to feel successful. Sorry, I feel like I keep interjecting, but I feel like
that's it.
The
they
kids
were
that you were working
successful fast.
They were successful fast.
Yeah.
And I think our kids who are in, more structured learning environments through special education at school, like they are working on so many different goals. And I think sometimes they aren't unaware that things feel hard to them at times, or that maybe that things are harder for them than it is for other kids. And I think the dopamine hits of success is really powerful in the study. And I haven't thought about that before until you were talking about, the number of elicitations, but or even, thinking about how I'm using it in my current practice. I have a girl who loves to be amped up and cheered for. And I think this model of service is really good for her because I'm cheering her. I mean, she's so successful.
She's learning words fast.
Yeah. She's already doubled her word inventory. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. I do think that's a huge piece. I also, this is again, future study. I want to figure out if children are successful faster, do we see less device abandonment? Do they own their systems more? Do they want to keep their systems with them more?
Yeah.
Do parents see progress faster and then want to have systems at home? How would early word learning impact a greater language development experience? Not just the actual language development itself, but the experience of it.
Wow, I think that's a really great concept. I hadn't thought about that, but
because if you learn something faster, if I am proud of the words that I know on here, then I'm going to bring it with me and show it to people.
Right.
But if I keep learning a bunch of things that are really hard for me to learn and I haven't learned anything yet,
forgetting where they're at, and
then I don't want that thing. It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. And perception is everything. Even for me, if I am perceiving a task to be hard, I will put it off and I will not really want to do it. And so I think giving kids access to quick victory feels really good for them. Yeah.
And so with that in mind, then I think words that you were teaching children early on should be a mix, because that's what we see with typically developing children, verbal children. Anyways, it should be a mix. If you're having a hard time buying in, start with a couple nouns that are super motivating.
Yeah.
If the kid loves dinosaurs, teach dinosaur first.
Cookie.
Teach cookie first.
I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah, no. Yeah, bring the child's snack. It just whatever can help the child to understand that I can be successful and learn words on here. What we did in the intervention was we taught 6 nouns and 4 verbs.
Okay.
And per intervention session. Now the kids learned the nouns faster than the verbs, and that
makes sense.
Natural. But regardless, then they got access, the words that they ended up learning at the end of all of it was a variety of words, and they then could start to pair those words together. Now you have set the child up to 50
them up for
words.
Success.
You've set the child up so when they get to 50 words, it's not just nouns and it's not just verbs. You've given them some nouns, some verbs, some descriptors. Yeah, some descriptors in there. We didn't in the study, but I would in real life.
Oh, okay.
It just wasn't.
I feel like that's a good note because I have been realizing just even lately, descriptors are real big for
especially colors.
Yeah.
Right. Colors are great.
And kids love colors and it's worked on a lot in academic settings and stuff like that.
So I do want to say real quick, and then I know we've harped on this study for a long time, so we can move on.
Yes, we'll have to move on, but it's a good one.
Thank you.
It's a good one.
Yeah,
the people must know.
Yeah. So if I were to do this again in real life, I would teach maybe 5 to 8 words, depending on the child, per intervention session. I would maybe every 2 or maybe every 3 weeks. I mean, I think it depends on how often you see the kid because you don't want to spend too much time doing this. But maybe every 3 weeks, you cycle back to some old words that you've taught before and just show the picture. Hey, just almost test them real quick. The kids just did well when they saw the word and had to remember the navigational sequence. It's they hadn't forgot it, but I think that a quick memory, because if you teach bear and the child learns bear and then you ditch bear and you move on and you don't ever come back to bear, then the kid might lose bear. But if you just
and maybe that's a good
really
push
quickly,
for
just
SLPs to find some creative ways to loop back in or bring in, or I'm even thinking if you did zoo animals like 3 weeks ago and you've moved on to farm animals, read a book about zoo animals and have them fill it in.
Yeah.
Do some fill in modeling at that point, maybe.
Yeah. Or even like if you're doing that and that's your testing, if you're in the schools because you have to report every 6 weeks or every 9 weeks, like maybe that's when you're coming back and you're testing the child to report on skills gained, but you're also just like, you're being therapeutic while you're testing them as well. You're sort of like 2 birds, 1 stone kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I would do that, and then I would also 2 quick things. One, at the end of each session, maybe for 5 minutes, 3 minutes even, I would play with like the toys that we have that represent the topics that we just discussed.
Yeah.
So we did a language sample at the end, and the kids did use the words that they learned in a structured intervention naturalistically in the language sample.
Oh, great. I think that's a good point to make.
But I think that's a good place to start. Like if you worked on jump and you worked on monkey, that's a good spot to say monkey jump. And you're starting, you're starting to show the child how to combine these words together that they are in the process of learning. They're not going to pick it up at that point because developmentally they're not there. Maybe they will.
Yeah.
But it's okay. You're just you're prepping them for moving forward and you're just keeping things, you're giving a natural flair to it at the end. I will also say, create word lists, teach them, and they do not have to know every word before moving on.
Yeah, I think that's a good reminder. Yeah.
Kids had to know 7 out of 10 words twice before we moved on to a new word list. And
that's good.
If they just didn't learn the other 3, then they just didn't learn the other 3. And that's fine.
And it's fine because you're still going to keep working on word learning.
You can circle back to them later.
You can circle back.
Yeah.
Another thing that I want to add, just how I've applied some of this clinically, is I have some object toys that relate to early word learning that I use instead of a picture just because it's what I have on hand. And I know that's like not, I guess, what was done in the study, but I find that it works the same for me at least. So like the peekaboo barns I mentioned earlier. So we'll open the barn and we always do like open or the color of the barn, and then I'll do the pathway for the animal, and then we'll do our little sequence, and then night, and then we put up, and that's like our routine, and then we play with it. And so that's just kind of how I've implied some of that clinically using what I have on hand. And I know as speech paths, like, you know, look for what you have in your office and how can you use it that way. And of course, like sometimes, you know, you need to have pictures of things that are harder to tangibly hold, but just thought I'd share that piece as well. So, okay, so it's a good study. Like we said, it's a good study.
I love that
study. Do you find that intervention studies are maybe more fun to conduct? I don't know.
They're a lot harder to conduct and they're a lot riskier because they take a lot of time. And if it doesn't work, you've wasted a lot of time, which can be a problem if you live in a world where your job depends on being able to publish, which is common.
Oh, interesting.
And so they're a lot riskier, but if we're going to know anything about intervention, then people need to be doing them.
People need to be doing them. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't think about the risk. That makes sense.
It's riskier and there's just more to it. There's more to control. I mean, it took me like a week, I think, just to find all of the words, much less than put them into lists that are all balanced with each other. There's just a lot of pieces that go into it, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And the outcomes are if they are meaningful, they're very important.
Yeah, I do. And I feel like this means a lot. I feel like this is a great takeaway for all speech therapists who work with kids with AAC. So.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
it was fun.
Of course. Okay, so that kind of wraps up that next study. So tell me about your most recent study that you're still kind of finishing up right now.
Yeah. So we're finishing up this study. The more that, you know, we just talked about this with the other study, but the more that we looked at how children made more progress when you were like drawing attention to navigating their systems, you're sort of drawing attention to their categories. And so we got curious, like how do children who speak using AAC, how do they categorize things? Is it related to their systems? Is it related to their cognition? Are they performing similarly or differently from their age-matched peers? Are they performing similarly or differently from somebody who has the same receptive vocabulary size as them? So we wanted to see how well these children can sort. The reason that is important is because we store words in our brains using categories.
Right.
And so if children who speak using AAC have difficulty understanding categories, then that can be indicative of them having difficulty finding words in their brains, not on their devices, finding words in their brains to be able to say that word out loud. Yeah. First of all. Second of all, if the device is influencing any of that storage, I would actually argue that it probably should be influencing that storage.
Yeah. That makes sense to me, working with kids who have language delays and use AAC. I feel like my AAC kids, like, using the device helps their categorization skills.
Yeah, and they should, I think. Now, if I come back later with some studies that finds that this is wrong, then don't hold me to this.
You'll just let us know.
Right now, today, on April 5th of 24, I think that children should have categories on their systems, like in their brains. They should categorize things the way that they're categorized in their systems, because they have to be able to find them.
Yeah.
So, like, if you want to say pencil on Lamp Words for Life, you have to touch the rainbow. Okay, typically developing child, adults, anybody is not going to categorize pencil under rainbow.
Yeah.
But if you want to be successful on your AAC device, you have to know that in order to get to the pencil, I touch the rainbow.
Yeah.
That is, you must know that, or you can't get there.
Hit. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't get there.
Yeah.
And so I would say, like, I think it would be healthy if, to some extent, if devices were influencing children's categorization and understanding of categories in general. So we're evaluating that. We're also looking at how children who speak using AAC, like, if they can move flexibly between category levels. So a rose is also a flower, is also a plant. So if I say, give me the flower, will you give me the picture of the rose? And understand that if I say, give me the plant, you should also still give me the picture of the rose.
Okay.
Kids that have word finding deficits and children who are deaf or hard of hearing both have deficits in doing that. It's sort of indicative of just, like, difficulty storing words based on category, and then difficulty understanding what a single word actually encompasses.
Yeah, I work on categories a lot.
Yeah.
With friends.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're in the middle of that study right now. I don't have results.
Okay.
But it's a fun one.
It's a fun one.
To be later discussed.
Okay, sounds good. We'll have to talk about it in the future.
Yeah,
An excuse for you to come back.
I love that.
Okay, well, super exciting. Can't wait to keep learning from all the things that you are figuring out and all the questions you're asking and all that good stuff. Okay, so give us some advice. If someone is listening and they're thinking, maybe I'm interested in becoming a researcher, what are your top tips? What's your best advice?
Yeah, I'm looking at my computer because I have a couple notes over here.
Okay.
I would say start by figuring out get a list of people that you would like to get, like, to mentor you.
Oh, cool.
Your PhD education is only as good as your mentor.
Yeah.
I say that over and over and over again. Like, it doesn't matter the program you're at. If your PhD mentor does not have the time or have the skill set to teach you what you need to know, then you're not going to learn it.
Yeah.
So find somebody who, it does not need to be like the top name of your field. Find somebody that somewhat understands your area of interest.
Yeah.
Find somebody that is good at grant writing. Find somebody that is funded or is getting close to being funded, which is something that people are able to discuss. But, like, you can sort of discuss that based on scores of grants that you submit and things like that.
Okay.
So, but find somebody that knows how to write grants. It's really important. Ask about their research agenda, because you may or may not, it depends on the program, but you likely are going to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And so if you are really interested in learning about intervention research, but you're working with somebody who does not do intervention research at all, then even if they're in your topic area, you're not going to get the skill set that you need in order to move forward.
Interesting. Okay.
So find somebody that does the type of research, not just the topic area, but, like, the type of research that you're interested in. I would actually say, like, you're going to learn how to do research and how to grant write. It is more important that you gain those skills potentially with a topic that's close to what you're interested to, maybe doesn't align perfectly, than it is to go learn under somebody who is your exact interest but can't teach you how to grant write and do a research study.
Okay,
so
that makes sense.
Those are important. I would look for programs that will pay you to go. You should not be paying to get a PhD in our field.
And so is it pretty common that you can get paid to go?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a huge shortage, and so you should get free tuition, and you should get paid to go. So look for those programs. Don't pay to go.
Okay.
Start following like communication sciences and disorders programs on their social media. Look for the social medias of the researchers themselves and go follow them. You can kind of get a good idea of like the vibes of their lab.
Yeah.
Go on Twitter. Academic Twitter is a thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how like social media is really broad now, and I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just a medium. Like, it's just the medium that our culture uses. But I love that some of the doom scrolling can be redeemed through some good academic content.
Well, that's where the academic people are at.
Yeah.
They're on Twitter. Some of them are on Instagram, and for those that are, I think it can be really helpful. Way more than Instagram.
Oh, I don't Twitter.
Oh, that is where everybody's at.
Oh,
like
gosh,
people
I got
tweet
a Twitter
5 or 6 times a day. Yeah.
Listen, okay.
Well, is it Twitter anymore? Is it X? I don't know.
Oh,
I don't follow that.
That's the thing. Let me just tell you, I had a Twitter in like graduate school, and so I go back, and it sounds like my maiden name on it and everything. I go back and reminisce on the old days and read my old Twitter. Yeah. Sometimes it's mostly embarrassing, so don't go looking for it.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that.
Okay. It's pretty good. So, but I should probably make a new Twitter. Anyways, I am sidebarring us on the Twitter thing, but I didn't know that. Okay.
Academic Twitter is where it's at. So if you want to understand what people think about, what studies are being published, start figuring out who you're interested in getting a PhD under, or just in general who publishes literature that you're interested in. Go follow them, and go follow the ASHA journals. They're constantly like putting out things that have been published, and then go to ASHA booths. And a lot of people at ASHA booths, if you're at ASHA or if you have a state association, they might have something there for like the universities within your state. But ASHA booths will typically have
I would imagine
people that are talking about PhD programs. Yeah, you can go like kind of get connected and get a feel for, like, you want to get along with your mentor too.
Yeah,
like you want to. I mean, maybe not be best friends like that.
Like a good healthy boundary relationship.
You want good healthy boundaries, but like you want to get along with them because they.
When you and your mentor, I feel like have a great relationship. Yeah,
she's great.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's very cool. Okay,
she's wonderful.
Well, real fast, we have time for one more question. Yeah. I, know that you have always specialized in AAC, and I would love for you to share, if someone's like, I really want to specialize in that, what should I do? Because I think I used to feel like, oh, I really want to do AAC, but I don't know that I knew what to do to get started, and luckily fell into some really great support when I met you, and I learned so much. But if someone's like, I want to learn more, what should they do?
Yeah. It's so hard because it's just hard. It's so hard. Yeah.
And it's kind of niche.
It is niche, but it's so important. These kids need help.
It's so important. Should not be as niche as it is.
Yeah. I would say check yourself. You should always be thinking about language.
Yeah.
So if you're vetting some sort of training or something like that, and it's not about language, then that's a problem. Like, it should be related back to language, or if it's not, there should be a good justification as to why it's not.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would always, just use your own brain to vet through what you're looking at, the information that you're looking at. 1, 2, go, what we said, follow the academics. It's not always overwhelmingly helpful. But we talked about this, I didn't mean that. Let me correct that. Academic information is incredibly helpful. That the people in academics that are posting information is incredibly helpful. It just may or may not be geared to what you explicitly need to know to practice in the schools.
Or even to get started with the specialization.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's going to you'll sort of be jumping in instead of at the beginning.
You'll be it as you go.
Yeah. You're going to be jumping in sort of ahead of the game. So, I would say, I had one more thought before I was going to... Oh, we talked about this last time. It just watch who you're following watch who you're learning information from.
Yeah.
And make sure that you're learning information from somebody who is in the literature, who is familiar with research, and is somebody that's like familiar with practice as well. Like you need somebody that knows both. Like I follow Randy. Follow Randy Brown.
Thank you.
That's what you need to do. Follow Randy Brown. But like follow people that you know that you can trust. It's if you don't know if somebody is looking at the research or whether or not they understand the research, but you're gonna follow them to guide you on all of your decisions, you might be guided into decisions that are not research based. So like find somebody that's plugged into the literature and understands it. Just follow Randi because I know that she is.
Oh, well, you are so sweet. Thank you. I hope you do follow along, but I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
I loved it. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I know that in the future there will be ways to find you on social media and things like that. So I will keep everyone posted. Right now, you are Operation Finish the PhD and raise the baby.
Yeah.
So, but get to May. So after May, I will plug. Yeah, I'll plug more information for Courtney once it's available. But thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.